He's right there and somehow completely out of reach. You can feel it, that invisible wall he's built around himself. You're not imagining it. You're not being too much. You're standing in front of a man who has quietly decided, usually a long time ago, that being emotionally open is dangerous. And here's the thing most people will never tell you. The problem isn't that he doesn't feel. It's that he feels everything, and it terrifies him. You've probably tried being patient. You've tried being understanding. Maybe you've even tried pulling back, hoping he'd come forward. And still, nothing. That distance remains. That wall stays up. But what if the issue isn't what you're doing? It's what you don't yet understand about why he is the way he is. Because emotionally unavailable men don't need a woman who pushes harder. They need something completely different. Something most women never think to offer. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's happening inside an emotionally unavailable man and what actually has the power to change things. Welcome back to Lena, where we talk about the things most people think but never say out loud. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I post every week and I promise you this channel will make you see people differently. Let's get into it. Here's a number that should give you pause. Research suggests that more than 25% of adults have an avoidant attachment style. That means roughly 1 in 4 people you'll ever date has been wired, usually from childhood, to instinctively retreat when intimacy gets close. Avoidant attachment isn't a character flaw, it's a survival strategy. Somewhere along the way, this person learned that needing people leads to pain, that vulnerability leads to rejection, that love has conditions, and those conditions are exhausting to meet. So they built a wall. Slowly, subconsciously, methodically, and by the time you meet them, that wall doesn't feel like a wall to them anymore. It just feels like who they are. The reason this matters right now in 2024 and beyond is that emotional unavailability has become one of the most common frustrations in modern dating. Women are more emotionally literate than ever, and the gap between what she needs and what he can offer has never felt wider. But here's the shift in perspective I want you to carry into everything we're about to cover. Reaching an emotionally unavailable man is not about changing him. It's about understanding him at a level he's never experienced before. And that understanding, that's actually where your power lives. So let's break this down, starting with number 1. Picture this. You have a great date. Deep conversation, real laughter, undeniable chemistry. Then he goes quiet for 2 days. No text, no call, nothing. And you're left wondering, did I do something wrong? Did that mean nothing to him? Here's what's actually happening psychologically. When emotional closeness peaks, the avoidant nervous system registers it as a threat. Not consciously, it's almost neurological. Research on attachment theory, particularly from Dr. John Bowlby and later expanded by Dr. Stan Tatkin, shows that the avoidant brain has literally been conditioned to associate intimacy with loss of self. So when things get warm, the instinct is to cool down. This is crucial. His withdrawal after a good moment is not evidence that he doesn't care. It's often evidence that he cares more than he knows how to handle. What does this mean for you? Stop interpreting his silence as rejection and start recognizing it as self-regulation. You don't need to chase him into that silence. You need to not make the silence mean something catastrophic, because that reaction from you is exactly what confirms his fear that closeness is unsafe. A lot of women, when they sense emotional unavailability, instinctively turn up the emotional volume. More vulnerability, more deep conversations, more expressions of feeling. And the man shuts down even harder. It seems backwards, right? Here's the psychology. Emotionally unavailable men are often what psychologists call affect phobic, not incapable of emotion, but overwhelmed by it. The nervous system of someone with avoidant attachment treats emotional intensity like an alarm bell. The more intense the emotional environment, the more urgently they need to escape it. What he actually needs is psychological safety. Not romantic intensity. Safety. Consistency, predictability, low-pressure presence. He needs to feel like he can exist around you without being expected to perform emotional openness on demand. The brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, can only access vulnerability and connection when it is not in threat response mode. Practically, this means stop having the same emotional "where are we" conversation over and over. It signals danger, not security. Instead, be the calm, steady presence that doesn't require emotional theater from him to feel loved. Over time, safety is the only thing that actually lowers the wall. You saw something in him, a tenderness beneath the surface, a glimpse of the man he could be. And now, without even realizing it, you've made his emotional growth your project. You're reading the books, listening to the podcasts, trying to find the right words, the right approach, the right moment. Here's what behavioral psychology tells us about this. When one person takes on the emotional labor of another person's healing, it creates what's called a caretaking dynamic, and caretaking dynamics are deeply disempowering for both people. He stops developing his own emotional capacity because someone else is managing it for him, and you start losing yourself in the process. More importantly, and this is the part that's hard to hear, you cannot want someone's growth more than they want it for themselves. It doesn't work. It builds resentment on both sides. This doesn't mean give up. It means recalibrate. Your job is to be a person worth growing toward, not the person doing the growing for him. There's a massive difference between being a supportive presence and being his emotional therapist. One is love. The other is an unequal arrangement dressed up as love. At some point in his life, and research suggests it's almost always in childhood or an early defining relationship, he extended himself emotionally, and it cost him something real. He was laughed at, abandoned, criticized, or simply not met. And his nervous system filed a report. Don't do that again. This is the neuroscience of emotional shutdown. When we experience painful emotional events, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, essentially adds that type of vulnerability to its list of things to avoid. Over years of reinforcement, vulnerability stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like self-destruction. This doesn't excuse his behavior. It explains the origin of it. Why does this matter practically? Because when you understand the story behind his wall, you stop taking it personally. His emotional unavailability predates you. It was there before you arrived, and it will continue, regardless of how perfect you are, until he decides to do something about it. Compassion without responsibility, that's the healthy version of this understanding. You can hold empathy for his past without making yourself responsible for his healing. You've had the talk, maybe more than once. You've explained how you feel, what you need, what's been missing. He nods, maybe he even apologizes, and then 2 weeks later, nothing has changed. So you try again. More words, more clarity, more of the same. Here's what's happening cognitively. Emotionally unavailable men are often what's called dismissive avoidants. They've learned to intellectually process feelings rather than feel them. When you talk to them about emotions, they go into their heads, not their hearts. They listen to manage the conversation, not to connect with what you're saying. The counterintuitive truth? Your silence, genuine, non-punishing silence, is often more activating than your words. Not silence as a punishment, not silence as a game, but the silence of a woman who is so settled in herself that she doesn't need to fill every gap with explanation. This is deeply rooted in behavioral conditioning. What you don't respond to immediately, you teach him to pursue. Your words, when they come, carry more weight when they're not constant. Your presence becomes more valued when it's not guaranteed. This is not manipulation. It's the natural law of what we appreciate versus what we take for granted. Here's a pattern I want you to think about. Many women who end up with emotionally unavailable men have, at some point, communicated through actions rather than words that emotional unavailability is acceptable. Not deliberately, not obviously, but through overfunctioning, through staying anyway, through making exceptions. From a behavioral psychology standpoint, this is operant conditioning in practice. What gets tolerated gets repeated. Every time you adjust your needs to accommodate his inability to show up, you're reinforcing that his behavior is workable. Not because you're weak, but because you care. And caring without standards is not love, it's self-abandonment. Your standards are the most important signal you will ever send an emotionally unavailable man. Not ultimatums delivered in frustration. Not threats you won't follow through on. Standards, the quiet, consistent embodiment of what you will and won't accept. A woman who truly knows her worth doesn't constantly explain herself. She simply makes choices. And for an emotionally unavailable man, especially one with any real attraction to you, a woman with genuine standards creates a motivation that no conversation ever could. Because suddenly, there is something real at stake. This is the point I want you to sit with. Because there's a difference between a man who is emotionally unavailable with everyone and a man who hasn't found someone he wants to be available for. Attachment research, particularly from Dr. Sue Johnson and her work on emotionally focused therapy, shows that avoidant attachment is not permanent and not fixed. Men who were consistently avoidant in previous relationships have become fully present and emotionally engaged partners when the conditions, the person, the dynamic, the internal motivation were right. Attachment styles can shift. They are patterns, not life sentences. But, and this is the honest part, you cannot be the one who decides he's ready. You can be extraordinary. You can be everything he never knew he needed, and he can still not be in a place to receive it. That is not your failure. That is the reality of timing and personal work. What you can control is whether you stay in a dynamic that drains you, waiting for a breakthrough that may or may not come, or whether you invest your emotional energy in someone who is not only capable of depth, but actively choosing it with you. That discernment is not cold. That is self-respect in one of its most mature forms. If you've ever cried over someone who couldn't tell you what they felt, you are not alone. If you've ever loved someone so patiently that you lost track of your own needs, you are not alone. If you've ever felt like you were trying to hold on to someone who kept one foot always out the door, you are not alone. Here's what I want you to take from everything we've covered today. Understanding an emotionally unavailable man is not about softening your edges to fit his limitations. It's about becoming so clear in who you are and what you need that you naturally attract and create space for men who can actually meet you there. The women who successfully navigate this dynamic are not the ones who loved harder. They're the ones who loved smarter. They brought patience without losing standards. They brought empathy without becoming responsible for someone else's healing. They held space, but they never emptied themselves out to fill his. You deserve someone who, even if he's imperfect, is actively choosing to show up for you. Not someone you have to perpetually coach, coax, and convince. Real love, the kind that sustains you, comes from someone who wants to be present, not someone you've managed into it. That's not too much to ask for. That's the minimum. Tell me in the comments which of these points landed hardest for you. Was it recognizing that his withdrawal isn't rejection? Or was it the one about your standards being his signal? I genuinely want to hear where you're at with this. If this video resonated with you, subscribe to Lena Member. I post every single week, and every video is built to give you a real edge in how you understand yourself and the people around you. I'd love to have you here. And if you want to go deeper, watch this next. It connects directly to what we just covered and takes it even further. Trust me, you'll want to see it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one. If the man in your life seems emotionally closed off, you're not imagining it, and you're not the problem. In this video, I break down the psychology of emotionally unavailable men, why they pull away after intimacy, what their distance is really communicating, and the one thing that actually has the power to reach them. Drawing on attachment theory, neuroscience, and behavioral psychology, this video gives you real insight, not just theory, so you can navigate this dynamic with clarity and self-respect. Have you ever been in a relationship with an emotionally unavailable man? Drop your experience in the comments. I read every single one.